Last year at the owners' meetings, Jed York said, hey, it's no problem to have Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance on the same team. It worked out with Joe Montana and Steve. And, we could sit Trey Lance for 2 years. He said that when they drafted him. We could sit Trey Lance for 2 years, no rush. Well, they essentially did. Now it's year 3, and he's coming off a very serious ankle injury. It might be the owner's business how the Niners use Trey Lance going forward. Do you think he has any say? He cares at all? And do you think the Niners are going to have to be a little bit more prudent and judicious with how they use Trey Lance's legs?
Okay. I'm not inside those meetings. My gut feeling is Jed chooses to have very little to say about it. That he has such confidence in Kyle Shanahan and all Kyle has accomplished. He has the same kind of confidence in him that he had in Trent Baalke.
Yeah.
What he does is he holds on to these people for dear life.
Like buoys, life vests. Yeah.
Yeah, he's drowning and he holds on to these people for dear life.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really know that much about football.
Right. He's not Al Davis.
No. So he leaves it alone. I don't think he'll have that much. He says things he shouldn't say to the media, but I don't think he has that much input. What would he say to Kyle? Kyle, I wish you would use Trey Lance more, and then Kyle would give him some baloney while he was hurt, but he didn't let him in the system. You know what I mean? He'll talk him out of it.
He could say, look, Kyle, I've given Trey Lance $25 million. You've gotten him injured running twice. I want to see him play quarterback. I don't feel comfortable with you running him as much between the tackles early in the game. We got to find, can we compromise here? Is there a way that you could use him a little bit more judiciously and keep him on the field? I mean, I just want to say, this happened with Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL. And then I remember the year he came back, they were in training camp. And the fans were there. And Kyle wanted to show off. So we called that play Philly Special. It's the 2-point conversion play that the Eagles ran against the Patriots in the Super Bowl where Nick Foles runs and catches the pass. Do you remember that? You may not remember. Anyway, it was a famous play, and Nick Foles caught the pass, scored a 2-point conversion. They beat the Patriots. Anyway, that year in training camp, they call that play for Jimmy Garoppolo. And he catches the ball, and the fans erupt. Jed York's watching, and he goes over to Kyle immediately and talks. And Matt Mayoko notices. We go to the post-practice press conference, and Matty says, hey, I noticed Jed walked up to you after that Philly Special play. What'd he say? And Kyle's smiling. He says, yeah, he said, don't ever do that again. He said, you got a quarterback who just tore his ACL. He, is coming off a surgically repaired knee. Don't ever do that again. And Kyle was like, he smiled. He said, hey, fair enough. I was just messing around. So Jed does care, and you're the owner. You should freaking come in and say something like, this is your investment. So I don't know. I think it's at least fair for Jed to have a meeting with the guy and ask questions. What's the plan? Are you going to run him like that again, or are you going to try to protect him a little bit now that he's coming off this serious injury?
Let's say this. You and I both agree that he should talk to Kyle. And he should at least ask the kind of questions of Kyle that we would ask of Kyle.
Yeah.
He's the freaking owner. Well, he's not really the owner, but he's the designated owner.
Yes. He greenlit the whole Trey Lance project. It's like they never even did it. And it's like a producer trying to ask a director, like, hey, are you ever going to make this movie? Or what's going on? I gave you $25 million. What's this? And I know he's worth billions. It's still $25 million. I mean, he's haggling with his neighbors. He's haggling with the youth soccer club. He cares about $25 million. I would. I don't know.
Iggy, let me ask you a question. If you were Kyle Shanahan, how would you use Trey Lance?
It's a great question. I would be much more careful with Trey Lance. I would not use him as a runner more than 2 or 3 times. Maybe at first, I wouldn't use him as a runner at all. He could scramble, that's fine. But in terms of the zone read, I would say don't keep the ball, at least at first. Hand off, because they don't need him running the ball. They have good running backs. He wasn't that productive as a runner. He got hurt a lot. Just be a decoy as a runner. And then we'll work from there. We'll give you 1 carry a game. And it'll be in the 4th quarter when we really need it by the goal line, not in the 1st quarter on 2nd and 8. Just let him play quarterback before running him out of the organization, because they really haven't let him play quarterback yet. They made him play running back.
Iggy, I agree with you. Trey Lance is either going to succeed or fail as a quarterback, not as a runner. And I want to go back to Steve Young. When Steve Young came to the Niners, he was an unfinished product. He was, and that's
you call him a running back.
He was a running back, and
he was a running back.
Was they would have a play called, he would ignore the play, it would break down, he would run. Bob McKittrick, the offensive line coach, would go crazy. He was very angry. I mean, it wasn't personal. He liked Steve, but he didn't like Steve as a player, and he would tell me, we have a play called, I have my guys blocking, now they don't know what to do because Steve's not doing the play, he's running all around.
They don't know where he is.
They don't know where he is. So what happened was Bill had to say to him, you have to be a quarterback. You have to throw the ball. We don't want you to run. And then Steve heard it because he's a good guy and he's really bright, and he became one of the top 10 quarterbacks who ever lived. So,
and he could balance the use of his legs and his arm beautifully.
Yes, but the arm came first.
Of course. Absolutely.
And that's what they have to do with Trey Lance. He's not a quarterback/runner. He's a quarterback. Every once in a while, he'll sneak in a run.
Right, and they kept saying that they wanted to develop him as a quarterback. We're sitting him for a year to develop him the right way. Yeah, but you've gotten him injured as a running back, and those injuries have set back his development as a quarterback. So you don't even know what he can be because you haven't really developed the part. If you wanted a running back, a dual threat, that was Justin Fields. Justin Fields might be the best athlete in the NFL. He averaged 7 yards a carry last year. He's crazy. That's the guy if you want to do that offense. Trey, the whole thing was, no. He's going to be under center. He's going to be a real quarterback. We're going to take our time. Well, do it now then, because now he's probably going to be even slower than he was before.
Do it now.
Do it now.
These are the San Francisco 49ers. You have a throwing quarterback. This is a legacy from John Brody and Joe Montana. These are the kind of quarterbacks you have around here.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to point out that it's not like he's Colin Kaepernick. He's not a particularly great running quarterback. I mean, he's averaging 4 yards a carry. On that zone read, he was reading it incorrectly. Like, he needs to develop as a runner in the NFL as well. So which one are you more committed to developing, his running or his passing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
I got one more question, quarterback question for you. First game of the season, whoever they're playing, who's the starting quarterback?
I know, right? And we're going to go through their schedule and try to predict wins and losses. That's a pretty tough thing to do with this team.
But who's their starting quarterback?
I'm thinking Trey Lance. I'm thinking Trey Lance. Yeah. I mean, he would have to really get hurt or play awful in the preseason to not start week one. Because I don't think it's responsible to just say, hey, Brock, you had no offseason, go start week one. Or Sam Darnold, like, hey, man, you've been on the team for 6 months, and we're really invested in Trey, but he sucks. So, Sam, why don't you go get him? Like, it's got to be Trey, right?
It's got to be Trey. But, it's interesting. It's got to be Trey, but there are so many questions about Trey. And we always talk about the Super Bowl window, It's hard to have a Super Bowl window when you don't know who your quarterback is. It's kind of the most important. Wouldn't you say that quarterback is the most important position in sports?
Yeah.
In sports, not in football, in sports.
Yeah. And what's interesting is you're starting to see that the way that the NFL has changed the rules and they want scoring and they want more offense, you could argue that the number one most important position is quarterback. The number two most important position is offensive tackle, left and right. And the number three most important position is wide receiver. Offense. I mean, I'm just saying. Or a tight end who's a wide receiver like Travis Kelce. You got to have all of those things. Got to.
Yeah. And it's not a quarterback who can run. All praise to Lamar Jackson. I'm not wild about him because he's an average thrower. I don't like an offense like that. Plus, he got hurt.
Yeah. I do think you have to have, I'll put it this way. The quarterback has to be able to use his legs in the NFL today. You can't be a statue anymore. But it's like, are you a runner first or a passer first? You got to be a passer first, but you also have to be a runner second. You have to have both, I think. And that's why I never believed in Jimmy Garoppolo. He's got nothing with his legs. Nothing. He just stands there. Plants himself in the ground. He's got roots in his freaking feet. Roots, Dad. Roots.
It's still amazing, Iggy, that the Raiders went for him and are paying him all that much money, and it really tells you all you need to know about the Raiders.
Absolutely. Salim says, love you and your dad. Thanks for the great content, especially during the offseason. What happens if Trey goes crazy early, but then Kyle hurts him? You'll be pretty pissed, and I guess we wouldn't really be surprised. It's kind of been Kyle's, I don't know.
What
Dad,
happens?
What happens?
What happens is then they put in another quarterback who'll go really well until he gets hurt. Kyle gets quarterbacks hurt. There are certain things you can depend on with him. He's not going to win a Super Bowl, but he's going to come close, and he's going to get quarterbacks hurt and not blame
and running
himself.
backs. And running
backs.
backs.
Yeah.
Poor Christian McCaffrey, man. They were giving him like 25 touches a game down the stretch, and he was limping around the field doing his best. Now you got 17 games of that, Christian. Ooh, I feel terrible for him.
Yeah.
You can't use running backs like that, especially little ones. Todd Labor says, hey, guys, enjoy the chat about Trey. I'm learning how to play the saxophone while listening to you guys. First time my whole life I'm learning how to play music. I'm 40. Give Trey a chance. Don't trade him. Go Niners.
Hey, I got to tell you, I love saxophones. I think one of the greatest inventions of world culture is the saxophone.
I do too. And one of the nice things about like 1980s pop music, which I don't think you know about that much, is there's often a saxophone solo. Like there'll be an electric guitar solo, but sometimes there's a saxophone solo. You don't hear that too much anymore. The saxophone solo.
Springsteen had a saxophone guy.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
He knew. Front Row Justice says, Grant, why don't you argue back with Kyle after his snub responses like your pops used to do? Rather than complain on here that you didn't like an answer, maybe respectfully push back to get the answer you want.
It's not like that. May I answer for you?
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the auditorium, you have to have the microphone. Mm-hmm. And because it's a big room. And when you ask your question, you have to surrender the microphone. When I was doing it, it was a much smaller press corps. It was it wasn't in an auditorium. It was in a little room, and you could shout. You could shout it out. Am I misrepresenting it, Iggy?
Sometimes it's in a smaller room, but the way I look at it is like it's not my job to like argue with Kyle. If he gives me an answer that I disagree with, like I don't have to. I'm not supposed to sit there and be like, well, you're wrong. Like that's when I write. That's when I get to talk. And I never saw you argue with Jim Harbaugh or coaches at. You might tell him, hey, you know. Okay.
I did argue with Chip Kelly because I had such little respect for him.
Fair enough.
When he let Kaepernick take over
that's
the
true.
team.
That's true. But you weren't arguing about football. You were arguing about, team
how to comport yourself as a football coach.
That was different. And that was something you felt like, actually, we're on the same level here. But for me to ask a football question and Kyle to give an answer I disagree with and be like, oh, I disagree with you. Like, I just don't
I
understand.
do that.
I think it's unprofessional. Yeah. Also wastes everyone time. Like it's not about me and him. It's other people want questions too. Watching Steve's runs still amazed me. What a quarterback. No zone read for him. It was all scrambles. I always feel like Trey's a very dangerous scrambler, much more than the zone read stuff.
Iggy, sometimes I would see Steve Young walking around the facility in shorts, and you saw him that time when you were a little kid. Did you see those legs? He had legs like a linebacker. Like a
running back. He was built like a running back. 6'2", 220.
Yeah.
He's like Jalen Hurts. He was with Steve Young in his prime was like Jalen Hurts, maybe a little bit taller. Brock Purdy? Have you seen Brock? I mean, Brock Purdy's a little fella. When they try to do those quarterback sneaks with Brock Purdy, it's like he's getting thrown around by waves in the Pacific Ocean. It's like, hold on, Brock.
I want to say something. About superstars.
Yes.
And it applies to superstars in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
There are two clear. Well, Joe Montana was a superstar, but he was shy. Steve was a superstar, and Stephen Curry is a superstar. I don't think we could argue about either one. Both of them are so approachable. I'm going to use the ultimate praise. They are so normal. Steve and Stephen are so normal. And it made my heart glad that these were the superstars we had. Can you imagine having to deal with LeBron James?
It'd be tough. It would be tough.
You think you could walk up to him like Stephen Curry and say, you got a minute, let's sit. I don't think it happens like that over there. Stephen Curry and Steve Young, both the most normal people and set the tone for a team.
I actually think 10 years ago when LeBron was on the Heat. He came to the Bay, and he had a huge scrum around him. You pushed your way to the front, and you said, LeBron, how's it feel to be a villain now? And he loved the question, and he gave you a really long answer. I think actually you and LeBron would have done pretty well. LeBron's a little bit like Steph, where he's just really well trained and polished with the media. I think Steph is not necessarily as normal as he seems.
Interesting.
Steph is one of the greatest athletes of all time. To push yourself to that level of excellence, you got to be so dedicated to yourself. Yeah. I think he's a lot like Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady was just a guy, an aw shucks guy, and then he went on this 20-year run to be the greatest athlete of all time. So you think Steph's getting done? Like Steph's 35. He's about my age. He could go another 10 years. I think he probably wants to be the greatest athlete of all time, and he's still on a mission. So I don't know. Steph's very interesting, but you could always work with him. Definitely you could always work with him. He's very...
Oh, God, it was a pleasure.
Yes. But I would think that Klay Thompson's a little bit more down to earth.
Klay Thompson is completely down to earth. Klay Thompson and his whole family. It's a lovely family.